Welcome to the first in our series of Livestream events hosted by Cyient, part of the CXO Science Designing Tomorrow Together series. My name is Des Blanchfield. I'm honored to be your host and moderator for today's event, focused on intelligent infrastructure design. There can be no doubt that 5G and the Internet of Things, or IoT, have opened up possibilities on various fronts, resulting in the rise of innovative business models as new use cases emerge for consumer and enterprise needs. In fact, it has now become imperative for CSPs to embrace intelligent tools and techniques for not only planning coverage and capacity, but also deployment and management of the networks. Techniques such as automated, zero-touch provisioning, and predictive maintenance are being adopted at a much faster rate to manage the massive amount of network elements being deployed. The focus is now not only to build it right the first time, but also build it intelligently so that the operation management becomes efficient and effective. Today, I'm joined by three experts in telecommunications. Let me introduce today's panel to you. We're joined by Guido van der Mast, who's the Chief Executive Officer of VWT in Netherlands and Germany. Guido, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Pat Coxon, who's the Managing Director of Strategy and Transformation at British Telecom UK. Pat, great to see you here. Thanks for making time to join us.
Yep, morning Des, morning everyone.
We're also joined by Prabhakar Alta. Prabhakar is Senior Vice President and Head of Communications and Utilities Business Unit at Cyient. Prabhakar, great to have you here. Thank you for this great series.
Thank you, Des. Hello, everyone.
So we have a fantastic hour of power ahead of us. Let me just briefly outline today's agenda. We're going to kick off with a market update by Prabhakar, Senior Vice President and Head of Communications and Utilities Business Unit at Cyient. Then we have a live panel discussion with our team here we just introduced, sharing their unique insights and perspectives on the topic of designing an intelligent infrastructure. Today's panel discussion will cover the following key topics around 5G, the latest evolution and trends in wireless mobile network infrastructure, definitions and perspectives on designing intelligent infrastructure, and the overall impact of 5G, and in particular, what does it actually mean and why does it matter? So before we kick off with the panel, I wonder, Prabhakar, if I could hand over to you now and ask you to provide us a general market update around the whole topic of 5G, and in particular, some of the latest insights you're seeing from your perspective across the world market within Cyient and your customer base that you work with.
Thank you, Des. Thank you, Guido. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, everyone who joined the session today. It's a great pleasure and honor to be a part of this session. I'd also like to say special thanks to Mr. Krishna Bodnapu, the MD and CEO of Cyient, who has joined this conversation, Mr. Ajay Agrawal, the CFO of Cyient, and Mr. Nam, who is the Chief People Officer of Cyient. Thank you, everybody. So before I start off with a market update, let me share a common sentiment that I believe all of us share in this forum today. As members of technology and communications industry, I believe that we are humbled and honored to be able to contribute in our own way to the recovery from the pandemic. And our contribution is coming in multiple forms. It is coming in the form of enabling global interactions, enabling connected experiences, and enabling efficient functioning of individuals, organizations, which is basically being enabled by networks. And these networks can be physical, as in communications networks, or intellectual, as a forum that we are having today. So quickly at Cyient, our mission is applying technology imaginatively to solve problems that matter. That defines the purpose of Cyient. And within Cyient, communications is one of the largest business verticals we have, and is an area of strategic focus for the company, given the technology intensity of the work that is inherent in this segment. In communications business at Cyient, we work across 4 continents with 80 clients, 30 of which are the leading carrier providers across the world. And our proposition and contribution to all our clients and industry is around 3 things. It is around intelligent infrastructure design, it's around smart operations, and it's around enterprise network efficiency. So from our vantage point, from the vantage point of Cyient, there are a few trends that we have been observing for the last couple of months and the last few quarters, and during most of the year 2020. The first trend that we're observing is that we see a lot of investments. We see significant investments in the communications infrastructure and network space. With some data points around this, if you take Europe as an example, within Europe, in the mobile infrastructure space, we estimate an approximate $1 billion worth of investments to be made towards upgrading and also creating new infrastructures in the mobile space. And within the mobile space, we also see network densification as a key area of focus, which is very natural, I guess. And therefore, we see a lot of increasing focus on advanced micro and small cells. And this segment itself, we anticipate to grow in the range of 30 to 50% over the next 3 to 5 years. While this is on the mobile space, we also see significant investments in the FTTX space. And FTTX, as you all know, is the industry euphemism for fiber-based broadband rollout. Within Europe, we anticipate about $250 billion of investments, that is about $250 million investments to be made in the next 3 to 5 years, with an attempt to touch or connect about 250 million homes in Europe, which will then mean that if you superimpose this on the European population of 750 million, you see the kind of impact that this can create. So this is one significant trend that we are seeing. Let me pause here and let me ask you, can I ask you to share your perspective on how you see the investments coming through in the CSP space across the world?
Yeah, I'm on it, and thank you very much. Globally, what I'm seeing across telcos and carrier service providers in general is they're investing in a range of things, from core network infrastructure to the data center to the edge, and particularly the core interconnect across cities to 5G access points. We're seeing a range of investments in different size interconnects, such as Ericsson's 5G radio dot to top a pole with new radio antenna solutions, whether it's macro, massive MIMO, millimeter wave, or even microsites, through to investments in spectrum. There are a lot of auctions happening around the world at the moment, held by governments, and just allocating some of that space. People are investing in a range of spectrum allocations to essentially just support their 5G rollouts. So I'm seeing, as you just outlined there, a number of really significant investments required and also being made to essentially underpin the foundation of the deployments of 5G.
Thanks, Des. So just to continue the thread that you started off, Des, on the 5G rollouts, the second trend that we are seeing among the many trends is we see a significant acceleration of 5G rollouts. 5G rollouts were always a part of the plan that many carrier providers had in the past. But in the current year, we are seeing a significant left shift of all those plans. Whatever investments were planned, whatever rollouts were planned in the next and the following year, we are seeing a significant left shift of it from the next years to the current year or for the next 12 months. As an example, Verizon has just announced that they have currently connected 47 cities in the US with 5G, and they plan to touch 60 cities by end of the year. Nokia has announced that they've bagged and they're executing about 100 5G contracts, 100 plus, by the way. And there is a metric which says that by end of the current calendar year, about 15% of world population will have access to 5G networks. Whether they subscribe or not is the next question, but at least 15% of world population will have access to 5G networks by end of the current year, which was not the original plan when we went into the current year. So that's the second trend that we are seeing globally in all the interactions that we are having. And the third trend that we are seeing is that enterprises, beyond carriers, beyond carrier service providers, enterprises who are one of the users or one of the user segment of the carriers, they're going through a point of inflection in their approach towards communications networks. One thing that the pandemic has taught many enterprises is the appreciation of networks as critical assets for organizational functioning, and therefore network resilience is becoming a key focus area in the current world we live in. And also in various segments, for example, in auto and mining, we are seeing increased focus on autonomous operations, given how the pandemic has shaped the way the workflow is happening across the globe. But thirdly, what we're also seeing is that this increased seriousness or this approach towards point of inflection is yet to translate into seriousness in terms of 5G readiness planning or technology readiness planning as a part of the enterprise architecture. So while there is acknowledgement, appreciation, and focus, we're yet to see this translate into a meaningful executable strategy for digital transformation and technology-led transformation at an enterprise level. So these are the three trends, or three threads rather. But just one caveat, given that communications is a multiverse, that's not just a universe, it's a multiverse. And given that there are a number of trends out there, we've only covered a few from our vantage point, but I'm very confident that in the next 1 hour, in the course of the conversation with you, Des, with you, Pat, and with you, Vido, we will uncover and we will talk about more trends. And with that, I'll hand it over back to you, Des. Thank you very much.
Prabhakar, thank you very much. Fantastic, an awesome market update there. And there are indeed, as you alluded to, there are so many big topics, and we're going to get into some of those. But thank you for setting the scene for us. So it's an exciting time to be looking forward. We've had a couple of good years behind us, whether it's design and strategy to now deployment rollouts. Really appreciate your update insights. Well, let's dive into today's panel discussion. As I mentioned earlier, we're joined by three experts with Guido, Prabhakar, and Pat. I'd like to just take a moment, though, to have each of the gentlemen introduce themselves. I wonder, Guido, if we could start with you. Could you perhaps just give us a brief introduction to yourself and a bit of an overview of your role and the remit of your role?
Yes, thank you, Des, and hello, everybody. I'm Guido van der Mas, and I'm the CEO of Volker Wessels Telecom. That's a company in the Netherlands. It's part of Volker Wessels, which is one of the biggest construction companies in the Netherlands, and we operate in the US, Canada, and in the UK as well. VWT, as we call it, because Volker Wessels Telecom is very difficult to pronounce. We have about 2,000 people on board, and my daily role is basically to keep the company healthy, so day-to-day operations, but also to set out the strategic lines to the future. And that's actually where we start 8 years ago when I joined the company, is create more or less a vision on connectivity than just being a contractor, because we design, build, and maintain networks. And in our view, we should aim for total connectivity, because that's what connects people, that's what connects things, and that will improve our quality of life over time. And I'm sure, Des, that we will be able to talk about that in a few minutes as well. So, and in my previous life, so before this, I was flying fast jets for the Air Force 23 years or so. So this is another type of connectivity. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, 5G is going to definitely need people to understand moving fast and moving data fast in particular. Guido, thank you. It's great to have you here. Pat, I wonder if I could bring you in next. If you could perhaps do the same thing, just a quick introduction to yourself and a brief overview of the remit of your role and any insights you can share about kind of what you're seeing now in your role across the 5G spectrum.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So I'm Pat Compson, Managing Director of Strategy and Transformation at BT. Interestingly, in my former life, I was also in the military, although I was working sort of slightly more on the engineering and cybersecurity side of things. But you know, since I left, 20 plus years in large-scale transformation, majority of that, apart from a foray into air freight handling cargo hubs, has been in telecommunications. I've worked predominantly in the UK, but with partners all over the world, in Orange, T-Mobile. I was the transformation program director for the creation and launch of EE. I've also been CEO of UK network infrastructure sharing joint venture MBNL. So very deep understanding of network infrastructure and rollout. And then most recently, Managing Director of Strategy and Transformation. So in my current role, I look after the development of all aspects of BT's consumer strategy, and that's 2030 back predominantly. And that's within the context and framework of the overall group strategy, which obviously includes networks as a whole, and a lot of the things that Prabhakar touched on a little bit earlier. But I also have the responsibility for translating that into executable transformation and then actually driving the execution as well. So it's a really good end-to-end transformation role.
Fantastic. Well, both of you bring a great tilt to the table, and Prabhakar, I know you do as well. I wonder if you could perhaps do the same thing, a brief introduction to yourself and your role and broadly the remit that you have there in your role across Cyient.
Absolutely. So at Cyient, our focus, our mission is on applying technology imaginatively to solve problems that matter. And we currently serve 9 different industry verticals across the globe. And in this journey of applying technology imaginatively, I'm joined by about 14,000 of my colleagues across 4 continents across the globe. And within Cyient, communications is a very important business for us. It is one of the largest businesses for us. And within communications business, along with my colleagues, I'm responsible for the business unit overall across the globe. And specific to communications business at Cyient, our mission or purpose is designing a connected tomorrow together. There are 4 words in this. The first 3 words, designing connected tomorrow, is our goal, whereas together is a demonstration of how we want to get to the goal, the purpose of how we want to get there, which basically talks about integration of various stakeholders into the journey that we are currently embarking on. That's pretty much about myself and my journey at Cyient.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking a moment to introduce yourselves and your amazing roles. I'm really excited to what we've got ahead of us here now. But before we kick into the topics we have to discuss with you, I'd like our attendees to consider posting questions as we go rather than just waiting to the Q&A section at the end. And we'll do our best to integrate those questions you pose through the panel conversation where we can. Use the tool, the chat window if you can, or the Pigeonhole tool to post them and vote on them. And the team in the background will make sure that we have access to them and see them, and I will do my best to integrate them in the conversation through the hour. We also want you to join the conversation on Twitter, so make sure you're following @Cyient, C-Y-I-E-N-T, and we'll have updated posts there. You'll have live tweeting my team on my handle, Des_Blanchfield. And there's a hashtag, #DesigningAConnectedTomorrow, as Prabhak outlined there. Follow that hashtag, post your questions, and the team will bring them into the chat as well. So let's jump into it. The first topic I wanted to table for the conversation today is one around the latest evolution and trends in wireless mobile network infrastructure. Guido, I wonder if I could start with you. In your role as CEO of a telco, you've got a really unique front row seat and lens through which you see these key trends around the evolution of 5G. Could you give us a view of what you're seeing both currently and what you might have seen over the last couple of years? And I guess you might have to break it into a pre and post-COVID view as well, in particular, but specifically around the latest evolution and trends to start with, and then you know, in the context of wireless mobile networking infrastructure.
Sure, thanks, Des. Well, we are basically, as in our business, we are more or less at the end of the chain or the front row, as you said. And what I saw the last 2 years basically is that first everybody was talking about 5G, 5G, 5G. So it was all over 5G, and it sounded to me by that time that it was more or less a marketing tool, because there was not really a 5G proposition in the market yet, especially not in the Netherlands, because we still have to auction the frequencies. So it's more or less a talk on television than that you really have the benefits of 5G. And then at a certain point, when actually one of our biggest customers, KPN, decreased his rollout of fiber, we saw other players jumping into the market. So a lot of private equity jumped into the glass fiber market, and now everybody is basically speeding up. So it's fiber, 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 fiber to the home, and then after that, fiber to the basically business or light poles or fiber to the X. So there's more or less a combination between 5G and rolling out fiber at the moment, maybe for different reasons, because I think that the business case for rolling out fiber and having a fiber optical network is very good to have. But that's basically what we see at the moment.
Okay, yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, there's a foundational need to have a network platform to build this on, but at the same time, one of the biggest focus areas around 5G is essentially the wireless network architecture, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting play there, where you've got a lot of investment, as you said, in the physical cable and the ground infrastructure and to the node or to the home or to the premises. But then when fixed wireless access comes out with 5G, it could be a complete game changer. And I guess this is why we're really keen to talk about this topic today. Pat, I wonder if I can come to you next, again, around the latest evolution and trends in wireless mobile network infrastructure. You work across the really broad spectrum, if you'll pardon the pun, between organizational transformation and the boardroom. And in your role at British Telecom, I mean, I'm keen to get your take on what are the key trends you're seeing in your market as we approach the end of 2020, a year of massive change.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything that Guido has said applies in the UK as well, in terms of private equity coming into fibre, etc., and investment in networks as a whole. You know, I think trend number one, when we look at the consumers and the users of the service rather than the infrastructure per se, is going to be the experience. So the criticality of seamless and resilient connectivity, whether you are in home or on the go, you know, that is a trend that we've seen. It's been particularly highlighted during COVID, where, you know, the desire to be able to operate at home and, if necessary, flip between a fiber and a mobile network has become a sort of really embedded behavior in a way it wasn't before. And so, you know, I think where that takes us to is the high level of investments that are going into networks at the moment, whether it's RAN or backhaul or fiber to the X or the converged core. I think that's going to continue at pace. That's sort of trend one. I think number two, the part that connected devices play and being connected plays in our lives is going to continue to rise. It'll be a significant trend, you know, whether it's for health and well-being, security, connectivity, learning, saving time and money, managing our lives. You know, I think that connected element of our lives will grow. At the moment, we're seeing sort of the household having an average of about 5 connected devices, and we're predicting by 2030 that to be in the region of 50. And every interaction will need a really strong network and will generate significant data that will need to be managed and supported. I think we're also seeing, a trend as these networks evolve and we start wrapping in some of the buzzwords of AI and machine learning and edge and mobile edge computing and network slicing. At the moment, they're words, we're building them, but they'll lead to richer experiences for consumers in particular, and a lot more immersive experiences. And then for businesses, it'll be how do we mesh them together into an ecosystem, which also includes digitization, enhanced global connectivity, cloud enablement. And so, ultra reliable, resilient, high availability networks, that's a trend that we see continuing. I don't think we can hide from the fact, though, that there are pressures, particularly on the UK market, but I don't think it's specific to us, around market revenues and market competition, and those trends I think will continue. And there's an uncertain economic outlook, which provides a frame that we're all operating on. But this overall integration of networks into the fabric of economic and social infrastructure means that, companies like BT, with an aspiration to connect for good, we should be well set to help our customers in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, there's some interesting key points that you raised that I just want to highlight. I mean, when we think about networks, often we've thought about cables as we've sort of covered a couple of times just already in this hour. But one thing you mentioned there around just the network being in the air, and 5G in particular, I think is something where whether it's a car going down the road, we used to have Bluetooth in cars to connect devices to them so we could share things. Now cars are coming out Wi-Fi. I can imagine a time when the car just becomes part of the network and the mesh, and it becomes a 5G access point, right? And that's moving very quickly. And I guess in 2020, with the impact of the global pandemic, we've now had to effectively be digitally transformed by default. People are tethering to their phones and working from them, or students are doing it from home, and we've really stretched the network. And one of the big changes I've seen is that we've effectively moved to the edge, and that's had to change things as well, which I think we're going to see, particularly in cybersecurity. Prabhakar, I wonder if I could bring you back in here now. I mean, again, when we think about the latest evolution and trends in wireless mobile network infrastructure, I think it's fair to say that your role and experience affords you one of the broadest opportunities to be part of the 5G journey. Where do you think we are currently in the evolution of the 5G adoption?
It's a very interesting question, but as a precursor to my view, before I share it, I believe that 5G is a manifestation of technology evolution in networks. It's a manifestation, but a very important manifestation. And the degree of importance is very high for this manifestation, in my view, is because of two reasons. The first reason is because once adapted, this would rapidly transform industries, economies, and lives. But the second reason why I think this is also very important to watch how the adoption goes through is because this sets a stage of evolution for the next Gs. Because 5G is just a G. There were Gs before, there will be Gs after. And the way the current 5G adoption is going to happen is going to set the stage for the later Gs to manifest themselves as we evolve in the industry. So therefore, watching this trend is extremely important. But in terms of where we are in this trend, if you break it into three parts, the first part is acknowledgement that a technology that can provide this level of latency, this level of speed is required. I think that acknowledgement is at a very mature stage. It is broadly acknowledged now that we require very, very low latency, very, very high speed networks. In terms of availability of technology, we just talked about it before. There are multiple contracts signed up. X percentage or 15% of world's population will get access to 5G networks by end of this year. But even then, with all that, I think the availability of technology is in a very early stage. Availability for deployment, so to speak, for a use case. That brings to the third part, which is the adoption part. There, I think we're all in a very, very, very nascent stage. There are use cases, definitely, very interesting, very compelling use cases, which will definitely turn into reality in future. But at the same time, these are in a very nascent stage. Also, equally importantly, I think there is a need to evolve a metric to measure the impact of this technology. The metric can be at a macro level, for example, what's the impact of this technology at a macro level to the GDP? What's its contribution to the GDP of a nation? Or what's its contribution to the economy? Or does it anyway meaningfully contribute to a global health index parameter? I think those metrics are yet to evolve and they will come through. So that's where I think we are. But wherever I think we are, I think this is a juggernaut. This is only going to accelerate. And Pat and I were exchanging some notes. By the way, as a trivia, juggernaut is an Indian word that found way into English dictionary. And rest of you can Google it afterwards.
Indeed, and I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here. During one of the dry runs, we did exactly that, and it's an amazing word. Questions actually come in from one of our attendees. Prabhakar, I wonder if I can stay with you. You touched on a couple of things there, availability and an adoption. Across the world, I mean, there are a number of telcos and CSPs that have already made great inroads to deployment and so forth. I'll paraphrase the questions asked, and that is that, are there particular areas where the adoption's been pushed out earlier than later? Is it a regional thing? Is it a national thing? Or is this a global trend that we're seeing now that 5G is being made available around the world at roughly the safe pace?
Okay, it's a good question. Because anyway, the manifestation of these trends that we talked about before are slightly different in different geographies at this point in time. That's the way we are seeing it. While the underlying trend of accelerated adoption is what we see across the globe, we see significant acceleration in Australia and a significant acceleration or left shift in North America, and it is just beginning also in Europe. So that's one part. Also, in terms of adoption of use cases, there is a high degree of interest. I think the initial adoption of the technology was in areas where it found quick wins or quick interest. We can talk about it later. But at an industry level, we're also seeing automotive and mining as the first adopters towards the technology making a difference to their operations.
Perfect, thank you. No, great points, and I guess there's some very natural fits there, isn't it? Particularly large infrastructure, whether it's mining, manufacturing, particularly with robotics, where we need big, heavy things moving around, and really low latency, high throughput to move potentially, a vision, intelligent vision with cameras on the devices to make sure they're not running into humans and hurting them. I like your comment about 5G, in effect, being another G, but sometimes people say not another G, not just another G, and there's almost a World War III started. I was in New York at a OSS BSS user group once, and the room was almost divided in half. Half the room said that it's just another G and we're moving on with it, and the other half said no, it's not just another G, it's a whole new world. And it was an interesting week. I wonder if we could talk about another key set of points here, and that is, when we think about this space, there are some key challenges we need to face around definitions and perspectives for designing intelligent infrastructure. When we were talking earlier, each of you shared some insights around some of the big investment being made, whether it's physical infrastructure all the way through to poles and wires, whether it's data center at the edge. I wonder if, Guido, I could start with you again. When we think about designing intelligent infrastructure, it's a really broad topic. What does this actually mean to you when we think about definitions and perspectives for designing intelligent infrastructure? What does that actually mean in your world?
Yeah, thank you, Des. But that's actually a very good question, because if from a technical perspective, we already have a meaning or a definition on smart, right, and intelligent, and that's more or less a intelligent or a very smart or a technical clarification. And how I look at it is more or less, it should be intelligent and smart, should make your life easy. So it needs to make life easier for you, so for the customers, but also for older people, or maybe people that are not so much digital savvy or whatever. So easy, big buttons, open access, and actually it should be open to everybody, but it should be secure enough for everybody as well. So there's like a balance between security and open network, and that makes it for me smart. So in the end, it should improve the quality of your life. It should be reducing the waste in the chain, and it should help you to instead of hinder you. And I think I have like 50 plus connected devices in my home, and my wife hates it, because I'm always pressing buttons and all those things. So to me, that's maybe smart, but for my family, it's still not smart enough. And I'm pretty sure that if I ask my mother-in-law, that she's like running away from it. So smart is for me also should help you. So easiness or intelligence.
That's a great point. Yeah, that complexity, right?
Yes. And then if you if you look at all the techniques and what you see now, so you have it on 5G, IoT, fiber rollout, and then we're going to talk about software-defined networks and cloud-native structures, and that's all fine. I mean, but it's technical, and in the end, you want to make it easier, more open, but also more secure. So that's basically it.
Yeah, there's going to be an interesting point in time soon where we have, the 54 territories and states of Africa, 1.1 billion people. We've got 1.3 billion people across India, 1.4 billion people across Southeast Asia and China, roughly 3.8 billion people. They're going to get their very first handset soon. Their first experience is going to be 5G. And they're not going to have any experience with dial-up tones or decadic, rotary dial phones or modem boing boing to get online. Their normal is going to be this whole new magic world of phones and phablets that go really fast. And I think you've raised a very interesting point there that carriers and telcos are going to have to prepare themselves, and certainly the service providers and the enterprises and companies providing services over the top of that, whether it's banking or transport or whatever it might be, they need to be thinking about all those things you're talking about there, which is make the apps and the infrastructure intelligent, because those people have no experience and no expectation. They just want it to be there. It's kind of like my teenagers. They think that the internet should be everywhere and it should be free. Pat, I wonder if I could come to you now. Again, definitions and perspectives for designing intelligent infrastructure. I'd love to get your take on particularly the intelligent infrastructure design and how that's transforming the world of telcos and CSPs, and particularly from the operational point of view.
Yeah. Like everything that we just said, I'm sort of right there. I spent 6 years at MBNL working in partnership with E and BT and 3, working alongside Nokia and BT and Virgin and AltNets and many others, and particularly Ericsson from an operational perspective. And the intelligent infrastructure debate and how you get there was really strong. But kind of really importantly, before I get into it, I'm absolutely with Guido. The most important thing here is about the customer experience. It's got to be about simplicity and ease. Whatever we build, whatever technology we talk about, whatever buzzwords we use, we need to build for simplicity and ease of access, simplicity and ease of use. And it's not easy. And that's the reality. It isn't an easy thing to do. So the big shift in mindset for a towerco like MBNL is away from sort of efficiency and effectiveness and reactive availability, and far more into designing for performance, designing for safety and security, delivering the right experience with maximum resilience and accessibility, accepting that total resilience and availability is an incredibly expensive exercise. And then it's about building capability that allows you to proactively manage and monitor what's going on and actually eating some of your own lunch. So using things like AR for field engineers so that they can diagnose faults or check configurations or map Fresnel zones, for microwave links and all of the other good things you have to do to keep stuff up and running. If I use a real example, the mobile network in particular, but also transmission networks, are affected by weather. In the UK, we get an absolute ton of that stuff, and we get rain, and we get snow, and we get heat, and the infrastructures, is susceptible to it. And so we put in place a program to actually map and monitor all of these weather events, and then look at how every single cell site reacted and how each transmission link reacted according to the different type of weather. We'd capture the data, we'd analyze it, we'd understand whether a site stayed up, went down and recovered itself, needed a hard down restart, or needed a field engineer. And then we could look at, do we then need to build in resilience, or do we need to harden it? And then with the advent of big data and AI, we can get really intelligent about knowing, do we need to pre-position field engineers, pre-position elements, pre-position anything? Then we're into the business of a really good customer experience. And so, from an operations perspective, there's a lot that you can do with the network to drive the availability and drive the experience using actually some of the stuff that we've talked about on this call.
There's some great points there. I have this very Escher-ish sort of mental image of the infrastructure, the networks and the systems we're designing and the handsets we're actually making intelligent and intelligent network actually looking at themselves and kind of, I have this Pokemon Go mental image of using my smartphone. I go at the back and I turn it to the sky and it tells me where the stars are. I can imagine being in the field and just point it at poles and it tells me where all the relevant elements are and the bill of material and the state and the age of it. There's a little bit of a synergy happening there.
Yeah.
I think it's going to continue to get more and more smart, and necessarily so, because the pace of disruption and the speed of the change and the deployment, I think we're well and truly beyond the scale that humans can cope with now. So when you talked about applying machine learning, particularly in types of artificial intelligence, self-healing networks, that whole designing intelligent infrastructure is a necessity now almost. It's not a desirable, right? Prabhakar, I'm sure you've got some very great insights in this space, given what you and your team across Cyient do with your customers. When we think about, again, designing intelligent infrastructure, I wonder if we can get your definitions, perspectives, and your views on some of the biggest benefits that telcos and CSPs are gaining from intelligent infrastructure design.
Thanks, Des. Actually, I second what Pat and Vido said so far. Actually, I should say I third, I guess, because I'm the third person in the row to say the same thing. So essentially, I agree with what they say. The objective of intelligence, be it human or machine, has to be simplification and not complexification. And if we're able to do that, we can create value by doing anything intelligently. So coming back to your question, I think there are two pieces to this. The first piece is the intelligent design piece, and the second piece is the intelligent infrastructure piece. So when the design is intelligent, be it of a network or of anything, in this case, the network, the cost of design can be optimized, the speed of deployment can be better, and the user experience can be simpler and better. And naturally, therefore, the ROI can be faster. And just as an example, how do you make design intelligent? This can be an abstract question. But in practice, in communications business, where we are involved, where we have seen, one can digitize the data collection process for the network design through LiDAR or virtual walkouts. One can automate design through a number of tools that are available already that can make it possible. But also equally importantly, one can and one should look at this from a holistic perspective and try to integrate the process of data capture and the design and not look at them as two different pieces of the design part. So when all is done, there are significant benefits in terms of cost, speed, user experience, and ROI. In our experience, we have seen in many use cases and many deployments that if you can do this well, if design is intelligent, there can be a double-digit percentage spend optimization on the design part itself. This is on the design piece of intelligence or the intelligence piece of design. And the second piece, like we talked before, is the concept of intelligence of infrastructure. And this phrase, intelligence of infrastructure, might at the first instance might come across like an oxymoron, because the classic notion of infra is that it is a piece of passive element or pieces of passive elements. But then infusing intelligence into this can be as simple as sensorizing the assets to capture data, or can go all the way to creating dynamic digital twins, which can be used to in real time monitor the performance and optimize the performance. These concepts of sensorizing assets, these concepts of dynamic digital twins are already being talked about. We are currently in conversation with a number of carriers in terms of how do we create dynamic digital twins. And when this is done, when there is intelligence in infrastructure, quite naturally, quite obviously, the efforts required to inspect and maintain can come down as significantly as by 30%. The revenue leakage from these assets, which is an important parameter for various carriers, can be brought down by about 10%. And very obviously, employee safety being a critical theme in the world we live in today, can be enhanced multifold. So in summary, a bouquet of benefits. Some can be intangible, but mostly tangible. And all these are much required in my view.
Fantastic. Pat, I wonder if I can come back to you while we're just on this point. A really fantastic question is being put forward with the Pigeonhole tool. And if you haven't yet, people, please do click on the Pigeonhole link in the chat and post your questions. Pat, a question that's been posed, and I'll paraphrase it because it's a couple of lines long, but it's essentially, how is intelligent infrastructure design going to be important to shaping Europe's digital future? It's a very broad question, but I know that given what you're doing around transformation and what you do across the board, at boardroom level, you've probably got some great insight into kind of where this impact is of Europe's digital future, I guess, in context of what we're talking about, particularly intelligent infrastructure design and access to 5G.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably two different lenses for this. I think the first one is the human framework. Second one's the economic framework. You know, the certainly Europe-wide, UK in particular, distribution of networks, the build of the networks, the enablement of the distribution of working, the digitization of businesses. You know, I think we see it as a huge opportunity in the enterprise space to make things a lot better. You know, to be able to offer more effective, more efficient ways of working, ways of doing things. And for consumers, I think within the social framework, and for people generally, you know, the ability to connect communities, the ability to enhance learning. You know, if we think that you know, students are the lifeblood of our economies going forwards, creating really immersive experiences for those guys in schools and in their universities is absolutely crucial. So extensional learning, I think, real opportunity. But I have no doubt that what we'll see, you know, if we extend what we're talking about from the UK out into Europe, out globally, some of the really big opportunities are probably in things like health, where the extensibility and the transfer of knowledge, the ability to remote operate, the use of haptics to be able to feel instead of look at, you know, BT are mobilizing medical services with air ambulance, so you can kind of AR see what's going on, and a clinician can see what's going on in the air ambulance. So there's some amazing things going on. So I think social and economic, we have a look at them. We say the networks of the future are going to help to accelerate the benefits into all countries.
Indeed. Guido, I wonder if I could bring you back in here when we think about the overall impact of 5G. You know, there are a couple of things that come to mind for me. It's, you know, firstly, what does it actually mean? And secondly, why does it matter? It is a huge topic, but I wonder if you could give us your favorite example of where 5G is having a positive business and society impact around the world, and some of the benefits you're seeing from the rollout of 5G.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I can follow Pat as well, that it's a huge opportunity for enterprises. If you look at the current 5G in the Netherlands, then for consumers, maybe it increases your speed a little bit, about 10% or so. But if you look at the benefits for enterprises and trying to get rid of some waste in the value chain, we've defined like 5 urban challenges for us. And so we are concentrating more or less on energy, security, mobility, health, and waste. And if you look at those, and you, for instance, you take mobility. So we have like a couple of thousand cars in our enterprise connected, and we do that on the 4G and some other tools. But imagine if you do that on the 5G, and we're looking into that, and then you can follow all your cars better, and you can follow all your equipment better. So it goes in a much faster way, and it's getting rid of all the different latency aspects basically in the value chain. So I think especially for enterprises it will be of huge value, and that's not only in the construction part but also in the health sector. So you can actually decrease the size of a hospital and maybe broaden the footprint of a hospital, because it's a lot easier to reach out to your patients in feeling or in inspecting a wound, for instance. We did a hackathon last week with students, and they were thinking about what the benefits for healthcare would be, and they came up with some really nice sensors how to measure the wounds you might have as a patient. So I see on an enterprise level, I see a lot of benefits.
Fantastic. Pat, I wonder if I can come back to you. I mean, you touched on some of the great points there in answering one of the questions that came in from our attendees. But again, you know, I wonder if I could just circle back to that overall impact of 5G, and particularly what does it mean and why does it matter? I know you've got such a broad reach of your role. In particular, I wonder if I could get you to give us some insight around the congruence of technology and social impact, and how you think the networks of the future are going to change our lives.
Yeah. I mean, I touched on a little bit of it in the previous answer. You know, again, I think this separation. It's not a real separation, but just for the point between the economic framework and the social framework and the human framework is important. In the human framework, we consider creativity, learning, humanity, and knowledge. And I'm not sure that necessarily these benefits are as obvious and as well communicated as they should be. I mean, we talk about them a lot in the UK, and they're really important to BT's overall vision around being connected for good. So I do believe that these fast networks will bring human framework benefits to society over time. It's not going to be today, and it's not going to be tomorrow, but it will happen over time. A couple of good examples that you touched on it a little bit earlier. From a pure sort of medical health and social health perspective, better connected communities is good for people. And again, COVID's been a great example that the importance of connectivity, human to human, human to multi-human contact, has just been reinforced in not only within our own communities, but within the UK community, the European community, and the global community. Then we have a look at some of the really positive social and health benefits that we're starting to see. I touched on that air ambulance use case, but the NHS I think the NHS latest stats are saying that they believe 95% of all of the GP, the general practitioners, are creating the ability to access remote GP consultations. So you don't have to leave your home. Now, any network can do that, but the richness of the inclusion of haptics, or the richness of the inclusion of data, or the richness of the inclusion of AR does require these better networks of the future. Connected hospitals, again, it's built into the NHS's long-term plans. Then we look at education, again, touched on it being the lifeblood of economies and countries and globally. 5G and fiber connected schools, colleges, university, low latency connectivity will give much better mixed reality, AR, VR, immersive learning experiences. It's not hard to imagine what it would be like to virtually observe an underwater ecosystem from a classroom, or walk amongst temple ruins in the Amazon jungles during your social history lessons, and you don't have to leave your classroom. And if you can do that, and you can distribute that broadly, that hopefully levels up the whole education system. So, I think with the right investment in digital skills, in devices, in ecosystems, and this is just two potential use cases. We do see human framework benefits, coming with these networks in the future.
Indeed, and your point there around access and leveling the playing field. I mean, education is such a powerful topic that I think 5G is going to completely transform, as you said, being able to do the augmented reality, and eventually, I'm sure when the networks are there, virtual reality. To I can't wait to go and see Machu Picchu, because I don't know if I'm going to get there in my lifetime, but I can certainly see it virtually. You talked about health as well. I've seen some fantastic projects where AR and VR were used in health, where people had acute pain, and hospitals around the world are running trials where they were giving people virtual reality experiences, or having visitors, particularly now with COVID-19, visit via VR or video conferencing, and distracted them from their acute pain and gave them some relief from it whilst they were dealing with health challenges, whether it's COVID-19 or otherwise. Prabhakar, I wonder if I could come to you now. I mean, when we think about the social impact of 5G, as part of the overall impact of 5G, and what does it mean and why does it matter? I mean, it's widely reported in the media that there are going to be social benefits. I wonder if you could share an example where you're seeing this take place in your work with Cyient customers.
No, absolutely, it is. It's a very relevant question. I also see a question coming up in Pigeonhole around the same topic being voted. At the expense of sounding like a broken record and repeating myself, I'll still say that 5G is just another important manifestation of technology, and it's a juggernaut. It's a very important one, it's a transformative one, but it is just a manifestation. And whether it is for 5G or any transformative technology, I believe there are two lenses of looking at it. Whether we look at the technology as a tool or as a master. If leveraged to its true intent, any tool, any technology, be it 5G or otherwise, can contribute to a number of benefits. And we talked about it. Pat talked extensively about the impact on health, where technology like 5G can provide better health through remote surgeries, which was a theoretical use case before, but is becoming very practical now, through remote diagnostics, through haptics, like Pat talked about just now. And Pat earlier also talked about the social cohesive impact of meshing or networks meshing people together. That can be a significant positive impact, but at a different level. And Pat was talking about education. So when deployed appropriately, this technology can also bring in a leveling effect of redistribution of not just wealth, but very importantly, knowledge. And therefore, technology also can be a leveling field. So all these can be, will be, and hopefully should be the benefits of technology when deployed. But if this is not leveraged well, and that is the second lens, when technology becomes the master and then the human beings become the tools, hopefully we won't, and I'm sure we won't, there can be several negative social manifestations of it. The first one can be very obvious, a manifestation of digital divide. As such, we live in a reasonably divided, polarized world. Divisions across geographies, genders, politics, economies, nationalities, etc. And if not manifested well, if not handled well, this can lead to another layer of digital divide between the digital haves who have the access and the digital have-nots who may not have the benefit of access. This can be one negative manifestation. The second can be the manifestation of the digital hierarchy. The distribution of wealth can also become very lopsided if this is not really leveraged well. The third thing is also definitely going to be the concept of, increasingly we talk about this, it's called digital fatigue, I believe. We are becoming very hyper-connected, and the hyper-connected world cannot replace human interactions, and that's something we need to be cognizant of. So there are two lenses to this, the lens of it being our tool or we being its tool. But at the same time, I think this framework also provides individuals and organizations with a purpose. And the purpose for all of us, therefore, will be to ensure that we keep an eye on the larger purpose of technology, that it has to be beneficial, it has to improve the quality of life, and it has to contribute to our human wellness, than the negative social manifestations.
There's some great points there. I think it is always too easy to forget exactly why we're investing in this technology and why we're developing them. That is to improve the well-being of human beings in general. And you've raised a couple of good points there. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for that fantastic conversation. It's been an amazing panel. We've got about 10 minutes left in the hour, so I'd like to now switch into the Q&A mode, the questions and answer phase. I've pulled out 3 key points I've seen from our attendees today, not necessarily the ones that have been voted for the most, but I think I'll try and paraphrase them for 3 in particular to get us started that I think are very pertinent with regard to today's topic around designing networks of tomorrow. Pat, I wonder if I could start with you, and I'm going to paraphrase the question from the attendees. In short, the question was, what should CSPs be thinking about as they aim to integrate 5G into their digitization strategy and mobilizing that strategy? And in particular, fixed versus mobile, with reach and applicability into the customer domain. You've touched on that a little bit before. I wonder if you could just circle back to that.
Yeah, certainly. I think for CSPs, it's I'd probably pick 3. Security first. We're talking about ubiquitous connectivity. We're talking about how important these networks are going to be to individuals, to groups, to communities, to companies, to countries. And so, that security lens that we need to apply to the networks of the future is a really critical one. So not just for individual companies, but companies that sit within a distributed supply chain, for themselves and their partners, that security layer is important. Secondly, I think probably about how the digital network gets incorporated into your company and what it can offer you in terms of efficiency or effectiveness or flexibility, supply chain and enablement, competitive advantage, but kind of really critically, how you can create a different, unique, simple, easy customer experience for your customers, and how and the part that the network may play in that. And then lastly, I would say data. You know, it's the lifeblood of many businesses, and it's inevitable that we're going to see an explosion in data points, and the collection, storage, curation, security of data is going to be absolutely critical. They will be the big three from my perspective.
Fantastic, thank you. We had a question that's come in from Twitter with people tweeting to the hashtag. I'll paraphrase it again. What are some of the ideal early use cases that organizations should consider with 5G? I guess in the context of this conversation, some of the quick wins that you've seen organizations can benefit from 5G with.
Yeah, I think that will be very close by for a lot of enterprises, and that's like getting reducing waste in the value chain you have. And I gave you the example on the cars and on the mobility side, and I see actually all mobility, especially in the Netherlands. I think half of the day we spend in traffic jams. Well, not so much during this COVID-19 crisis, but still it's very busy on the roads, and that might help. And that's always a good way to start, and because that will help you to go from 4G to 5G, or from the previous connectivity techniques you've been using to the 5G techniques. So I think that will be a good starter.
Fantastic. Prabhakar, when we think about this whole topic, one of the things that I keep coming back to, something I'm hearing across boardrooms around the world, is from board downwards, people are being challenged with this need to look from 2020 to 2021. We're easing out of this year. We're going to go through the Christian holiday period at Christmas. Everybody's having to come up with strategies for their business challenges, their technology challenges. They're now faced with yet another one, which is, well, what is our 5G strategy? I wonder, I'm going to paraphrase two questions and put them this way to you if I can. When you work with your clients across Cyient, could you give us an example of what the normal journey is for those customers when they come to you, from the initial advisory and professional services through design, through lab testing, proof of concepts, and then to a deployment, whether it's a trial or a full rollout? What are the key steps in that journey, and where should customers and when should customers come to you? I'm imagining as soon as possible, but could you just give us a bit of insight into what a normal journey is like for an organization, be it a telco, a CSP, or a large enterprise?
Absolutely. It's a very relevant question, Des, because in the last couple of months, we've been having a number of conversations with a lot of our clients across the globe on this theme of strategy or technology strategy, or in other words, digital transformation, that is being led by the technology elements that are currently available or will be available, like 5G. In all the conversations we've had so far and that we're currently having, we are seeing two approaches to address that conversation of what's the strategy for technology for the organization going forward, be it an enterprise or be it a CSP. The first way to address it is to come at it from the technology end. And this is rather an open and shut approach. You say that, look, what are my network needs? And then we weave 5G into that. That's useful, that's applicable, that is practical, but also can be tactical. What we've found meaningful so far is to approach this whole conversation from the business end. And what I mean by business end is the question, like, with the available technology options for enterprises today, 5G being one of them, what are the targeted business outcomes for future? And these business outcomes typically fall in various buckets. And increasingly, we are hearing this expected outcome of enhanced user experience. And Pat and Vido also talked about it before. We're also hearing these concepts of increased efficiency, and naturally all this lead to competitive advantage. So I think the first question that is currently being asked in boardrooms when we have these conversations is, what are the targeted business outcomes that the enterprise can aim at with the available technology options? And then comes the question of, is the organization designed to deliver those outcomes by its structure, by its process, or by the availability of knowledge? And when I say knowledge, I'm not talking about the business knowledge, but I'm talking about the technology knowledge around technologies like, and again, for example, like 5G. And then therefore, this flows on to the next question of, if this is a targeted business outcome, if here is where the org design is and here is how this will evolve, what should be the network architecture to deliver these outcomes on this org design? And then we can go down to this classic path of what are the network architecture requirements, the specifications, the design, the deployment, the management, etc., etc., etc. So this we found as to be a holistic path. And the first one, which is the discussion about targeted business outcomes, definitely has to be somebody done by somebody who has domain experience in the specific industry vertical we're talking about. And the second conversation about the org design has to be done by somebody who has, again, org experience of how organizations function. But the third conversation has to be held by somebody who has a communications industry experience and the capability to do system integration. But the best way to manage all of this is to work with somebody who can bring all of this together and then make a meaningful approach for technology deployment. And I talked about system integration at the end of it. And the reason why I brought up that concept of system integration is in whichever way we approach this question, whether we approach from the technology end or the business end, architecting a network around available technology that is today is possible. It's not easy, it's possible. There are a number of technology elements already available in the 5G landscape. And these technology elements can solve very, very specific business problems and deliver outcomes. But at the same time, enterprises also are looking for system integrators who can build all these together, bring all the elements together, build all the available IP together into a meaningful solution, not only design, but also deploy and take ownership to manage that. And that is where we are seeing some meaningful conversations between Cyient and our customers.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that, Prabhakar. We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up there. I would like to thank our amazing panel today, Guido van der Mast, CEO of VWT in Netherlands and Germany. Guido, thank you so much for making time to join us today.
You're more than welcome, Des. It was fun. Thanks a lot.
It's been a fantastic hour. Pat Coxon, Managing Director of Strategy and Transformation at British Telecom in the UK. Pat, fantastic to have you here today. Thank you so much for making time to join us.
Thank you very much indeed. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And Prabhakar Alter, Senior Vice President and Head of the Communications and Utilities Business Unit at Cyient. Prabhakar, always a pleasure to spend an hour of power with you. Thank you so much for your amazing insights. It's been fantastic to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Des. Thank you, Guido. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, everybody who has joined this conversation today.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone who registered and joined us today live. If you're hearing it in a replay, thank you very much for registering and watching it online again. And we would love you to share it with your associates and colleagues at work and your friends and peers on social media networks. This conversation is happening whether you join it or not. This is a comment I make to people a number of times. So I invite people to start that conversation as soon as possible. And if you're thinking about anything around designing networks of tomorrow, I would highly recommend that you reach out to Prabhakar and the team at Cyient and start that conversation sooner than later. They will help you through the early stages of design, planning, strategy, particularly with the new year coming and a year of uncertainty, and certainly help you avoid some of those early pitfalls where they've been there, done that, and probably printed some t-shirts for them. I also invite people to go and visit the Cyient website. That's Cyient, CYIENT.com. Click on industries and under communications. There's a whole range of amazing material there from network services, design portfolios, and solutions in general. Spend some time there. And make sure you follow them on Twitter as @Cyient and connect with them on LinkedIn and follow them there and get all the latest and greatest updates. In the meantime, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. It's been great to see you here today, and I look forward to doing it again with you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live today. And again, if you're on the replay, thanks for registering and watching the replay download. I'm Des Blanchfield. This has been a fantastic hour of conversation around designing networks of tomorrow. This is the first in the series of 2 initially. We'll have another one soon. Please stay tuned to the Cyient.com website for further information. We hope you'll register for event number 2 and see you there. In the meantime, stay safe. Thank you for joining us and have a fantastic morning, evening, day, night, wherever you are, and we'll see you again soon.